Well, hello again, everyone. My name is Bill Brucker. I am the Executive Director of the Stanford Museum and Nature Center, and I just wanted to take a quick moment to welcome you all to our very special members-only opening of our brand new exhibition, Printmaking and the Unconventional Pathways of African American Artists. This, if you haven't had a chance to go through the exhibit, is absolutely phenomenal and a very important exhibition that not only shows very important messages in the arts, but celebrates the African American culture that is so woven into the fabric of our country here. So I wanted to welcome you all and thank you all for being here. Thank you for being members of this wonderful organization. And for those that I haven't met yet, I look forward to getting to know each of you as I begin my tenure here. And with that, I would like to ask our curator of exhibitions, Roanne Wilcox, to tell you a little bit more about the exhibition in our beautiful gallery. So, Roanne.
Thank you. I'll take that. Welcome, everybody, and thank you again for coming. I'm Roanne Wilcox. I'm the Curator of Collections and Exhibitions, and I want to thank you so much for supporting the exhibitions program here at the Stanford Museum and Nature Center. We are so delighted to have this very special exhibition here in Stanford for the summer. I originally saw these works a few years ago at the Mystic Museum of Art, and I knew it was very important for our community to have them here, not only to experience the artworks, but to learn about the history of the African American artists and the ways in which they were able to get their artwork out into the world, which was not always welcoming. There are 72 works on display. 70 are from the collection of artist and master printmaker Dr. Curlee Raven Holton, whose curatorial scholarship is the driving force behind this exhibition, and who's here with us tonight. And I'd like to thank Paula. Yep. So there are 72 works here on display. I'd like to thank Paula, Alice, and Bill Mitchell, who are also here with us tonight, for their generosity in loaning two of the works, Jacob Lawrence's Revolt on the Amistad and Ramar Bearden's Mother and Child, two very important works. I'd like to thank Bill Brucker, our new executive director, for his support of this exhibition, and also Lynn Valenci Cohen, who is the chairperson of our Collections and Exhibitions Committee and our board of directors. And I'd especially like to thank our assistant curator, Jen Perry. She is our assistant curator and archivist, and she is also a very talented printmaker, and many of her tools are in the exhibition. She has donated her tools to help us learn more about printmaking. I'd also like to thank Ananda Holton. She's the managing director of Raven Fine Art Editions, and especially to Dr. Holton for working with us to bring this exhibition to Stanford. Dr. Holton is a master printmaker, painter, an educator, and a cultural leader whose work has had a profound impact on contemporary African American art. As an artist, his figurative representations and rich symbolism address deeply rooted social issues such as race, identity, poverty, and political history. His work has been exhibited in over 40 solo exhibitions and more than 100 group exhibitions throughout the country. It's held in the collections of the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian Institution, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Yale University Art Gallery, and many others. He served as the longtime executive director of the David C. Driscoll Center at the University of Maryland, preserving the legacy of African American artists. He's also established a commercial print shop, Raven Fine Art Editions, where he's worked with many of the artists in the exhibition, and to provide a workspace for both established and emerging artists to advance their creativity. We're so honored to have Dr. Curlee Raven Holton with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to say a few words as an introduction to my presentation, Printmaking and the Unconventional Pathways of African American Artists. First, I'd like to thank the Executive Director, Bill Brooker, and Roanne Wilcox, the Curator of Collections, as well as the Raven Edition staff, as Roanne mentioned, Ananda Holton, Managing Director, and Cody West, who's the shop manager, were really responsible for organizing all of this. Can you hear me okay in the back? But before I start my presentation, let me make this observation about the work of more than 40 different artists in this exhibition. African American artists choose printmaking as both an innovative approach to art making as well as a tool of social and political discourse. Constructing an authentic identity with the medium of printmaking. Printmaking is a process of layering images, image construction. If an artist has an image in mind, there is a deconstructed process, then a reconstructed process in the building of that print of that image. This process can easily become a metaphor for a deeper understanding of the creative process, along with insights into the more personalized, intellectual, and emotional impulse of the art maker, that the work is a self-portrait. Regardless of what an artist tells you, they are commenting on the world they're in, on themselves as self-reflective. It could be an abstract painting or a realistic painting. It's coming from the same motives, I believe. There has been many debates and assertions regarding the uniqueness of the creative production of Black artists. It has been described as not quite mainstream in its aesthetic vision or ethnically based, and as such a lesser art form because it's ethnically based. Let me assert to you that the creative act, regardless of who is the author, is an act of self-reflection and self-validation. African American artists have brought to this universal impulse a credible voice informed by their individual and collective experiences. This voice is rooted in a legacy of improvisation and material innovation, reflecting the spirit and ingenuity at the heart of our American dream. Now, I'd like to again thank the Stanford Museum for hosting the exhibition. I think it is a beautiful exhibition. And I want to acknowledge a few members of the audience, Paula and Bill Mitchell, who really planted the seed for not only this exhibition, but the one preceding it at Mystic Art Museum. Patrick White, who's a collector of the Raven Editions, who has traveled from New Jersey for the exhibition. I appreciate his being here and supporting it. And my grandson is here by accident because he has to drive me. He's the one with the phone. So this exhibition is about collaboration and creativity. Over the past 30 years, I've been honored to have collaborated with a number of renowned artists. I was looking at a famous book of artists recently by a photographer, and I was amazed at how many of those artists, over 100 in the publication, but how many of those artists I knew personally and I've worked with personally. I was even amazed by that. Our workshop has worked with over 150 different artists from different backgrounds. So I really appreciate this opportunity to show the collaboration process that, as Jasper John said, and Rauschenberg also testified, that they made better works of art when they made it in concert with another artist or a master printmaker. The collaborative process produces something unique because of its inherent engagement of multiple personalities and multiple aesthetic interests. Calling from my collection at Raven Edition, each piece on view represents a unique collaboration between myself and these groundbreaking artists of color. As an artist of color, the process of becoming a serious artist was slow and laborious due to the lack of information, role models, and opportunities available. My goal in the creation of the workshop was an accessibility to artists of color who was to introduce the printmaking medium as a communal creative activity and provide an opportunity to make new and innovative work. Decades of this commitment to printmaking and its unique potential for communal collaboration have not only led to expansion of these artists' personal practice, but also an evolution of printmaking as a powerful medium for social dialogue and the canon of art. Both David Driscoll and Nelson Stevens attributed the printmaking experience with me at Raven Editions as an igniting of their creative artwork during the later periods of their careers. They had been known as painters and as educators and scholars, but not as printmakers until they began to collaborate with me. The vision and reality that comes about because of this process. Art making, the art of understanding, can be one of the most intellectual and emotional impactful experiences a person can have. As a maker, the artist engages their mind, body, and heart in orchestrated effort to give a creative voice to their vision of the world, a world that includes both the exterior world that they are part of and the private interior world of their individual being. It is that engagement of the world that they are born to, but also how they interpret that world and respond to that world. So art is the language of that. Art gives a voice and a vision to what is interior, what is not always seen and not always spoken. Here's a very well-known artist working on a new print in my first studio at the Experimental Printmaking Institute. This is Al Loving. The message is the medium. Printmaking medium can be a significant form of artistic language when artists include it as a vital part of their creative expression. Simply put, printmaking, the use of multiple images and their matrices, offer artists visual and aesthetic tools that allow them to embrace their artistic investigation and spark conversations. This is Bob Blackburn at the Printmaking Workshop in New York City, the first noted master artist of record in the U.S. and established the first nonprofit major workshop in New York City. I studied with him, and at this point in time, you see I actually had hair when I was studying with him. But this was in the late 1990s and late 1980s and 1990s. Again, working on limestone here in Oaxaca, Mexico. So I've done prints and workshops all over the country because these artists have not only sought me out to collaborate with them, I've sought them out. Where I could go to a country like Japan or a country I didn't speak any of the language, but the art was universal. The art spoke, and everyone embraced the making of the art, and that it was the language of the body and the heart, as I mentioned before. Here's a shot of my studio. After I retired from Lafayette College and Experimental Printmaking Institute, I built a new studio on top of a place called Morgan Hill. So you can see me working with my long-term assistant to the right, Cody, who's been with me for 15 years now, and Jace Clark, who you'll see, who's been with me for over 20 years since he was a student. Here I'm working on a drawing, so you can see the preliminary steps in the process here. Let me back just a moment for you. Yeah, you can see me doing an image here, drawing, and then it's turned into a transparency that is then shot or digitally scanned and produces a film that is then used to create a sensitive screen. The screen is now it's a polyester, but they call it silk screen because it was originally silk. And you coat it with an emulsion, and then you expose it to light. And when there's a dark area of your image, that area is protected. And the area that is open and light gets bound by the light, the molecules and the emulsion, and becomes very hard. And that keeps your image from allowing ink to pass through. So this is how you control the areas in which ink passes through. So you can see Cody doing a pull of a print here. There's an example of a screen and a silk screen squeegee inside the workshop. And thank you to the artists that provided the plates as well to give a sense of the process. So each color is pulled, and you can see this on the next image. Each color is pulled, and a screen is made for each color. So it could be 60 colors, and there'll be 60 screens. Each is pulled by hand. So it is an original print that we're talking about, and has a very elaborate, very skillful process. You can see the targets at the top of the sheets, which allow you to register exactly each color. So again, each color has its own dedicated screen, and if you're printing an edition of 100, you're pulling out 100 prints of the yellow, and 100 prints of the red. On top of that, the same 100 prints of the green and the blue, and you do this till you complete the image. Again, a graphic work of African American artists has a long history, with the contribution first formally recognized during the Harlem Renaissance and brought to attention of the larger public during the Federal Works Project Administration. I love that you have the text in the exhibition explaining this. This is important. Two artists in the exhibition, Elizabeth Catlett and Robert Blackburn, are examples of professionally skilled and creative maturity that came out of that process. They were both associated with the workshop, New York workshop, that was created by Augustus Savage. Both Bob and Elizabeth Catlett worked there. African American artists have persevered to find a creative voice, often through collaboration with each other. So it was not only that they themselves were trying to find ways to create works, but they were telling other artists of color about those works and opportunities to get access to the opportunity to make prints. When I established the Experimental Printmaking Institute, it wasn't just for the artists of color, but they were coming anyway because they knew the door was open and few workshops were inviting them. My pictures express my life and experience. I painted things I know about and the things that I've experienced. That's from Jacob Lawrence, who has a beautiful print loaned by Paula and Bill Mitchell in the exhibition as well. I'm not going to read all the text. I'm going to let you read a little bit of it, all right? But the PowerPoint will be available to Roanne if you ever want to take a chance to look at it for more detail. In the context of contemporary art world, how do we explain the unique significance of the print medium? Fine art produced as multiple images, simply put, the multiple print provides us with two important visual and aesthetic experiences that enhance our cultural and social lives. The first, the print medium allows artists to capture through manipulation and documentation the dynamics of our lives as a tool of commentary and reflection. This is an exhibition in Egypt, Cairo. I was invited to participate in the Egyptian Biennial, and you see the two pieces here of my work in this show. Second, as a fine art medium, the print, the collaborative nature by which it is produced, and technical variations, both traditionally and experimental, provide a range of endless aesthetic possibilities. So I'm not only making something that is available to the public, printmaking is the most democratic form of art making because the intention is to produce multiples that you're then sharing with the community and audience at a very affordable price. And here are some of the tools in the printmaking process. And I'll just read the final paragraph of this because it just talks about the use of the tools. The future of the print is to be found in its unique potential for communal collaboration. The union of ritualized creativity is both primordial and powerful and offers a shared sense of relevancy for all its participants. The printmaking medium is far more than a tool in a toolbox of artistic mediums and approaches to art making process. As an art form, it is simultaneously the singular voice of an individual and expressive voice of the community. Keep in mind, where we normally have that individual artist that is in the private studio, making a great painting, waiting for the divine intervention from above to make the masterpiece. But in the print studio, it is wide open. The space is democratic in the sense that it invites everyone to participate. There's no ego controlling the space or what is to be made. The master printer facilitates the goals of the artist, so it is a very unique, very dynamic environment. So this collaboration is very important. The contemporary art world has long acknowledged the importance of the relationship of the artist and the printmaking medium as a major contributor to what we recognize as a modern art world canon. Both Robert Rauschenberg and Andy Warhol were two popular artists that took printmaking technologies to a new level, releasing the creative possibilities of printmaking as both a tool of visual communication and contemporary social commentary. While many artists will acknowledge that during the printing process, they develop a creative and engaging relationship with their printmaker, few delve into the collaborative impact of the body of work of the artist. This is myself with Audrey Flack to the left, a New York artist, and here's with Robert Blackburn with Norman Lewis in New York City in the 1970s. This is Bob Blackburn's printmaking workshop that was established in 1957 with a group of artists that came together to establish a communal space so that they could make prints. Now, the text in the exhibition speaks about the WPA program that created an opportunity for artists to make work. They received $23.50 a week for their services, but it was the most democratic sort of structure that allowed artists to participate and connect with their community, building murals, painting murals, building sculptures. Bob Hope, the famous comedian's father, was a part of it. There's a great sculpture in Cleveland that he worked on over a bridge in Cleveland. So it had a long history. And those individuals end up becoming some of our most important artists. Robert Rauschenberg, Larry Rivers, Helen Frankenthaler, all worked in the WPA program. We're connected to it and inspired by it. This is another example of the many group of artists that worked with Bob Blackburn. There may be 60, 70 different artists there that were impacted by his creation of a space that invited them in. Here's Bob here. There are a few cases of prints being made in African American artists at the turn of the 20th century, such as Henry O. Tanner, the first African American artist to receive acclaim at home and abroad for his work. For most African American artists, the first introduction to printmaking occurred during the Harlem Renaissance and the Works Project Administration. Robert Blackburn was one of those artists. Although faced with limited access to professional opportunities due to racial and economic barriers, African American artists persevered to find a creative voice, often through collaboration with each other. Here I'm interviewing Bob Blackburn when I was in residence there in the 1990s. Here I am with Faith Ringo, who we lost on her 93rd year, who was just a phenomenal artist. We were talking about her earlier today, me and Roanne. Her work was just exceptional. She followed her own voice, her own vision. She felt rejected as a young artist. She would go to galleries in New York City and they would look at her work. Male artists rejected her from their organizations or their groups. So she felt really alone, and she began to do a series of children's books called Tar Beach. She had never been to a beach, but on top of her apartment building, there was a tar roof, and she would set up blankets and pretend she was on the beach on top of that building. She was assigned, get an assignment in school to paint mountains. This is at City College. And she said she didn't know what a mountain looked like because she had never seen a mountain, because she was, of course, from Harlem in New York City. But her impoverishment became her fuel to create works of art that were unique and told her story. I first met her in the summer of 1992, and she was very important in my life as a mentor and as a role model. I invited her to my classroom one day and laid a plate on the table and a drawing tool in front of her and talked to her, and she just began to draw. And that plate in the exhibition is that first drawing that she had did, right in the studio in 1983. This experience blossomed to our first collaborative print, as I mentioned. We were going to print over 40 editions over a 20-year period. Here she is here to my right. When I first met her, this in 1993, and she did an original drawing dedicated to me in 2009. Here she is in her studio. On 9/11, she did a series of drawings about 9/11, attack of 9/11. All of those were sold immediately, and we did a series of editions based on those images. And I also wrote a book about her work for an exhibition at Allentown Art Museum called Faith Ringo, A View from the Studio. So you can see she had a major impact on my practice as an artist and my faith in myself as a practitioner. David Driscoll, art historian and author who I worked with, who I invited, first time my students were introduced to him was when I invited him to my class in 2003. And we were studying African American art, and we were studying using his textbook to teach African American art history. And then he walks into the studio, into the classroom, and he's so taken by everything that's happening and the visit to my studio, and he saw that I was working with Faith and William T., and he asked me, could he work with me? And I'm amazed. This is David Driscoll, who had the National Medal of Humanities from President Clinton, all kinds of awards. He said, can I work with you, Curlee? And you can see here an exhibition we did together in Oaxaca, Mexico. It was first international showing of his work, although he had arranged exhibitions by everyone else. Here to the lower right is David's signing Woman Interior, which we did in San Jose, Costa Rica. So I took a group of printmaking and students to Costa Rica with me because I'd gone there over a 10-year period doing prints during the summer. And I go there with David Driscoll to make a print, and I get a phone call one night. It's from the Presidential Palace, and they say, we understand you have David Driscoll in the country with you. I said, yes. So I said, they said they'd like to speak to him, so I sent someone to his room. And I'm thinking to myself, I've been coming here for 10 years and nobody ever called and said, we hear Curlee is in town. But David shows up, the Presidential Palace calls, and the print eventually went into the president's collection there. Here we are again in Oaxaca. So the process is a celebratory process. Not only that we give space and opportunity to tell their story and share their story with you, which is what we're doing. We're sharing a story with you, an American story with you. But we celebrate the very process of the creative act. And that creative act, I believe, is an act based on a desire to recover a sense of innocence. The innocence that we have as children, that we quickly lose as we grow up. Artists, I believe, are trying to create something that is missing, that is longing, that is absent, and to redeem their own sense of innocence. I believe that is the underlying motive, not only of artists, but of most of us, to recover our innocence. Here are some other shots we've been working with David and Falmouth, Maine. He has a studio both in Maine and New York City, plus in Hyattsville, Georgia. He said he went to Maine because when he was up at Skowhegan and studying, all these famous artists were there, and they all had homes in Maine. And he was a young student at Howard University, and he said, well, you know, if I'm going to be famous, I got to have a home in Maine. So he did that, and he became famous. Here we are with a show of this opus work, because this is what he considered his most important print and work of art was in the Washington Museum in 2019. And we produced over 40 prints in our body of work together as well. Mel Edwards, who we lost in March, you see some of his pieces in the show, was a phenomenal artist. Also in the film that Roanne put together, which I think is a beautiful piece of work. I appreciate that, Roanne. Your artistry, that work, and it was a great piece. But Mel, phenomenal sculptor, one of America's leading sculptor, passed recently. But here's his print work that he did with me. And the next image you can see Transcendence, which is a sculpture he built on Lafayette College. And he just completed a sculpture at the David C. Driscoll Center before his passing, called The Dream of David, which is a phenomenal piece. So he not only worked in prints, but he also worked in sculpture. Here he is here again. And then the video is some nice shots of him working. And I'll pass these because you'll see him in the show. Nelson Stevens, who was a teacher of mine when I was in junior high school, became a very well-known artist, very successful. And this is one of the final prints we did of his. And we have one in the print, Spirit Sister. I think we have both in, Primal Force too. But he was a phenomenal artist and teacher. The integrity of one's artistic vision is important. These artists are trying to tell their story in their unique language. To the left is Sam Gilliam, to the right is William T. Williams. And here you see, to my left, Richard Mayhew, who I've worked with. Here in my first studio at EPI, you see Jace Clark in the foreground, visiting student, the artist Richard Mayhew, and to my left, a student. Many of these pieces were printed with my students. When I started out, they were only my printing assistants were my students. And I can remember a student coming to me so proud that he had taken his parents to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and on the wall was a Faith Ringo that he helped print with me. And he said, look at Mom and Dad, my work is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He was so proud of that. So again, the sharing, you know, the collaboration, that you don't hold this work precious, but it belongs to all of us. Paul Keynes, whose graphite work you see in the show, Elizabeth Catlett here to your right. Allison Sarr and Willie Cole in the studio working with me. So these are all personal relationships that I've developed over time. Kevin Cole, Danny Simmons, that beautiful abstract piece. You see this of Louis Del Sartre. You see the painting of the Hammond House, the print Hammond House just before he passed. And you see also Mason Archie's Guide Me Home in the reception area. And again here, Preston Simpson, you'll see his print, and this is Jace in the studio. So now we have two studios, not only the one that I have in Morgan Hill in Easton, but we have Raven 2.0 outside of Philadelphia where Jace does some of the printing there as well, particular processes we use there. And here we have artists that have come to visit the studio, to hear about the studio. They ask, can they print with me? And most of the time we say no, because we only print a small number of projects each year. And we only print artists that we are committed to their body of work. So when I was at EPI, we were printing 6, 7 artists a year. Now we may print 2 a year, so it's a dedicated focus of their work. And then to the right, you see me in my art studio, because I have a private painting studio also, with a group of collectors that come to visit and talk about the work. These are collectors from Washington, D.C. Eric Keys, you see in the foreground there. Now, in celebration of the 10th year of Lafayette, I created the longest print in history. That's right, 21 yards long, 2,100 yards long. There's been some debate about this. You know, that Robert Rauschenberg supposedly did the largest print, but he did a print on a sheet of 22 by 30 that he attached. Ours was a continuous print. So I called Tyvek Company in outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and told them I was a hometown boy. I grew up in Cleveland that made good, and I needed their help. They said, well, okay, we'll give you the Tyvek, but you got to let everybody know you got it from Tyvek Company. And you'll see Tyvek when you do installations for the building of homes. But we had it on large rolls that we printed with styrofoam plates, large extended rollers, and they were all printed by students. And the way they rolled the plates onto the paper and printed was with a asphalt roller, which you can see here on the asphalt roller here. And these are three artists from Mexico City that came in to help us. And the president of the university was so taken by this that he would run around giving everybody pizza. He ordered pizza for everybody, and he's handing out pizza slices while we're doing this. Now this is generational. So it's not just my practice and my work with other artists. This is a painting of mine that's in the Allentown Art Museum, and these are my two granddaughters standing in front of the painting. So it's about communicating a message, and that message and that vision being carried generationally. And that's where I'm going to end my talk and give you time for some. So I have some time for questions if you like. Yes.
That 2,100 print that you did.
Yes.
How did you dry each one of them?
Well, this is interesting. We use acrylic ink, which is normally a printmaking ink, but we added a dryer to it, a liquid dryer.
Okay.
So by the time we lifted up and got to the third print, it was drying.
So you had a space in between.
We had space in between, and we had groups of students handling the plates. And they made the plates out of styrofoam, and then they would take hot glue guns and glue on the surface to create reliefs, or they would use gasoline with a paintbrush, and it would corrode the styrofoam. So that's how we had to recess the areas. So they would create the images. We had workshops a week before. They make all these images. We had kids in there from the community. And then we had runners with the plates. You place the plate, someone would come up with the ink, and then we had students that would pick up the plates, take them back. So we had a system going over the entire campus.
How long did it take?
All day long. It took us all day. And then we cut them up and sewed the sections to benefit the workshop so we could do other works. But we had no budget for the workshop. We were producing the works and selling the works to some galleries in New York and other places, but we were self-generating resources because we'd invite artists, whether they were internationally or national artists or local, and they would have no expenses. We would pay for everything. So this is how we did it for almost 20 years. Yes?
Isaac Newton once said that he stands on the shoulders of giants. You mentioned in your history the Harlem Renaissance, and you mentioned WPA, and you mentioned artists who you dealt with, who inspired you. Where do you think the future of print art will lead?
You raise a very good question. There's a problem that exists now. And I've been very critical of it. Most artists now, if you look at their bios or their introductions or their promotion, they do not mention at all who they studied with. Where when I'm generation, I studied with James Carroll, printmaking, Noel Rifle, Hal Workman. I could tell you the people I studied with, as well as Bob Blackburn, Dan Rohn. I'll tell you a story about Bob Blackburn, for example. He was printing in California, Robert Rauschenberg. The most famous print in America, called Accident, by Robert Rauschenberg, is in the foyer of the MoMA. This print won the Taipei Award, International Award for Printmaking. It started printmaking, contemporary printmaking interest in the U.S. Bob Blackburn was working on the stone, and the stone cracked. Bob Blackburn thought it was his fault and was devastated. He left the workshop. They invited in Dan Rohn from Yale, a lithographer also. Dan came in and said that it was not Bob's fault. that it was a vein in the stone that made it imperfect. He rejoined it, and Rauschenberg loved that there was a crack in the center of his image, and that was the piece called The Accident. Dan Rohn was also my teacher, and Dan Rohn told me the story. He said, now I want you to go to New York, Curlee. You got this fellowship with Bob Blackburn. I want you to tell Bob it wasn't his fault. Now, who am I to tell Bob? I said, well, Dan, you should have told him. He said, well, I tried. Dan's a beautiful operatic singer, but stutters with anything that is a bit risque or anything. You know, I did some images that he said were sort of black art and not, you know, universal, and it makes him a little nervous. He said he went to New York City, climbed up 6 flights of stairs, knocked on the door to where Bob lived. A woman came to the door, a very large, black, heavy-set black woman, and he said he couldn't get it out. This is Bob's sister. He said, I couldn't get it out, Curlee, so I want you to do it. So I would sit with Bob sometimes, and it was on the tip of my tongue, but I could never do it. It wasn't my place to tell him that. But Bob Blackburn, Faith Ringgold, David Driscoll, who studied with James Porter, who wrote the first text as a graduate student on African American art. And David wrote the seminal text in the Seminole exhibition in 1976 at the Bicentennial for LACMA Museum, documenting African American art that had never been documented this way. Art of slavery, art of free men had never been documented. America never knew this work existed. But David Driscoll inherited it from his legacy from his teacher, Lois Maylor Jones and others, and I inherited from them. Sam Gilliam, Nelson Stevens. And it wasn't that they told you you had to do this. It's because their very presence, the fact that they were choosing to do this. Emma Amos, who was in the show, said that when she walks in her studio, it's an act of rebellion, because they accept the understanding, the general notion is that artists of color have nothing to say and have no talent. So these are generations of artists that have gone up against that challenge and persevered. My first inspiration to become an artist was reading a book by James Porter, Modern Negro Art, wrote in 1943. Inside was a painting called The Janitor Who Paints by Palmer Hayden, 1936. I looked at that painting, and I was a janitor when I looked at the painting. I worked as a janitor at nights to get through school. And I looked at that painting and said, if that janitor can do it, I can do it. And that changed my life. So built on those shoulders, yes. But now, you know, as I say, young artists don't introduce who they study with. They're of their own creation now. They're magnificent. You know, no legacy is necessary. It's strange, it's very disappointing. It's a very unusual thing, but it fits the time we're in, so it's not so unusual. Through social media, you create your own world. They were not born of anyone. They were born of their own sort of genesis. No one else's gave them birth. Then they'd have to give credit to someone else. So no, these artists were very important to me. They lived through my work, and I've never forgotten them at all. Another question? One more, and then I'm going to get on a drive back to Easton.
What's your favorite printmaking process?
You know, it used to be, I was an etcher. I love the process of etching. I have a lot of scars on my arm from over etching the plates and slipping out of my hand, and the edges would be so sharp they would cut me sometimes. But I love the transformative nature and the alchemy of altering a metal plate to create a fine piece of art, and to lay that plate on a press bed with 100 pounds of pressure per square inch with a blanket on top of it and a sheet of paper, and you can't see it when it's coming through. But when it comes out the other end, it's magical. That you have produced something of value through your labor and your ingenuity and your creativity. Now, we've been very successful as a studio. And sometimes I think, and I tell my daughter, I got this brilliant idea. Let's do this. And she'll listen to me. She says, oh, it's not so brilliant, Dad. You know? And I said, well, you know, I should invest in something else. You know, we've done well. Let me invest in something else. And I keep coming back to one thing. I keep coming back to art as the investment. There is no other investment that will give you the return that art has given, not only financial, but emotionally. There's no comparison. You can get 5% or 10% maybe, but you can buy a print by Romare Bearden as a young man in the 1970s for $150, and it's $15,000 now. No stock market can do that. But guess what you get along with the work? You get the magic of the making, the moment of cultural relevance, and you are a protector as an owner of the print of a legacy, a cultural legacy that is our legacy that must be protected. There's a group I was, and I'm going to stop now. There's a group I work with in LaGrange, Georgia. I go there, I have a collector there and a friend that I stay with. And they have a group of people that prepare meals. They raise the food and they bring it together. And it goes between each family. And they call it slow eating. So they fix a meal and you have to sit down and eat slowly on purpose. And it's a counter to fast food. It's called slow eating. So we're all eating it very slow, but it's good, and everybody cooks it. Everybody has a dish on the table. It's a communal act of embrace of each other around food, sustenance. Thank you.